from our point of view, we don't want a deal about Ukraine without Ukraine being there, part of the negotiations and signing up to the final agreement. So I don't think it's for the UK government to tell Ukraine what to recognise and what not to. That's for them to decide. We're an ally of Ukraine. We have been for 3 years and will continue to be.
From the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, the Cabinet Minister, Pat McFadden. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
How extensive do you think a trade deal with the United States can be, bearing in mind, the position which has already been staked out on 10% across-the-board tariffs by the US?
Well, the level of engagement is serious. The Chancellor indicated that in her interview that you just played a clip from there. It's ongoing, and we hope we can get an agreement. I think it's possible. I don't think it's certain, and we'll only sign it if it's in the country's national interest. We don't want a signing ceremony for the sake of a piece of theatre. This has got to be a good deal for the UK. From the US point of view, I'm sure they would say it's got to be a good deal from their point of view too. What I can say is we're at a serious ongoing level of engagement. There is no fundamental reason why we can't reach agreement, but it's an unpredictable world. I can't say it will definitely happen, but I'm hopeful that it will.
Yeah, but it's not going to be comprehensive, is it? What people are talking about really is some kind of deal on digital, getting relatively soft on the American tech giants.
Well, a deal on digital has a big potential prize for the UK. We are good at this. We are a very creative economy. Obviously, the United States is very good at this too. And the digital economy is going to grow and grow in future years. If we can get a good agreement between the two countries on this, that is a big prize for the United Kingdom. So that's not to be sniffed at.
Well, is it? You've got to protect the public as well, haven't you?
Yes, of course you've got to protect the public as well. You're correct to say we may not be looking at the kind of a classic free trade agreement governing everything. We don't have to do that, but if we can get an agreement in certain sectors that are of mutual benefit to our two countries, that's well worth doing.
Now, 100 days of Donald Trump this week. How would you sum up those 100 days?
Well, he's certainly grabbed people's attention, I suppose, is the first thing I would say, and he's managed to do that. It's obviously been lots of things announced. We've been back and forth on this question of tariffs. If I got to right now, though, I think that's a very powerful image that we saw yesterday with President Trump and President Zelensky speaking one-to-one at the Pope's funeral. It's a picture. It's not an outcome in itself, but I think it's a powerful picture. And if out of that we can get to a situation where we can get a peace in Ukraine that isn't just a stopping of the fighting, but is something lasting and more secure for Ukraine, then that would be a very good outcome. But as you just spoke to me about trade talks, we're certainly not there yet.
And what would be the UK's part in it? I mean, for example, would the UK be prepared to formally recognise that Crimea is part of Russia?
Well, it's for Ukraine to decide on these questions and for them to have that debate. I think they've probably been having some of this debate in recent days within Ukraine.
But the Americans appear willing to go ahead and say, yeah, Russia can have it.
That's what the President said last week. But from our point of view, we don't want a deal about Ukraine without Ukraine being there, part of the negotiations and signing up to the final agreement. So I don't think it's for the UK government to tell Ukraine what to recognise and what not to. That's for them to decide. We're an ally of Ukraine. We have been for 3 years and will continue to be.
And similarly, sanctions were imposed by this country for a number of reasons, including the murder of the Skripals. Again, America seems to be talking about getting rid of its sanctions on Russia. Could we possibly follow on that?
Well, we'll make our own decisions on that, and we'll do it. Whatever we do in the UK's interest. You're right to point to We had the attempted killing of 2 people by Russian agents on UK soil. That rightly was met with a strong response. We've had further sanctions since Russia's uncalled for invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago. So we take these decisions as a UK government. If there's a broader agreement, we will obviously consider things in the light of a broader agreement, but we take our own decisions.
We've also got negotiations underway between the UK and the European Union. How extensive are you prepared to see freedom of movement for young people as part of that deal? It's clearly something that the European Union wants.
Well, there's been a lot of speculation about it, and I don't think it's particularly helpful for me to negotiate on the radio. The top of our agenda is reducing the bureaucracy and the cost, particularly in food and agriculture. And I think there'll be lots of speculation about what about this, what about fish, what about that. As with the US, we're working hard on this, and there's an important broader point here, Adam, which is a lot of this debate is around you can't do 2 things at once. If you're negotiating with the United States, that somehow means you're downplaying or rejecting a negotiation with the European Union. That's not the case, and not only is it not the case, it's not an option for the UK economy, for a broad, open trading economy like ours. We can't have a trade policy that says, I don't like you and I don't like you, but I might talk to you. That's simply not a mature trade policy for a country like the UK. Our economy requires us to trade with both the United States and the EU, and indeed other parts of the world too. And that's what will inform our positioning and negotiation on all these issues.
Now, you have put out a long statement today about improvements which you believe have been delivered since Labour won the election in the NHS. Why do you think that message is not getting across to the general public, as far as we can tell from every poll and survey and expectations from the election?
Well, it's the start. There's a lot of scepticism out there among the public about the capacity of governments, and I say governments in plural, to deliver anything. And I understand the scepticism because people have been promised lots of things over the years and not a lot has happened. So what we're saying today is, look, we understand the scepticism, but waiting lists in the NHS have fallen for 6 months in a row. They're down by over 200,000 since the election. Importantly, in the areas of highest deprivation and highest need, they've fallen by 50,000 because we're putting extra effort in there. We've also got these new diagnostic centres around the country where people can get quick blood tests without going to the local hospital and so on. Do I say that's changed everything in the NHS already? It hasn't, but it's important to tell a story that we can turn this round. That I know people are sceptical, but it is possible to improve the NHS.
I mean, there is a slight impression across the board that the government has, even within its limited, deliberately cautious approach to the election, that you've overpromised on what you can deliver, notably growth.
We've overpromised. I think beyond the NHS, we've got 750 new breakfast clubs. That was another thing that was in our manifesto. We're starting the recruitment of the extra neighbourhood policing. These things were the core of our election, and I think this question of delivery is really important because there is so much scepticism out there, and for democratic politics, let alone the Labour Party's interest, to deliver on these important public service reforms is really important. We are starting to see that in the NHS. We know that there's much more to do, but the whole government is determined to focus on this in a relentless way, because if you don't focus on it, you get pulled around in lots of different directions. It's very easy to be busy, but not to be effective. And that's why we're talking about these delivery statistics in the NHS.
But I mean, take the pledge to build 1.5 million homes by the end of this Parliament. long report in the Mail on Sunday today from a book commissioned by Michael Ashcroft saying that Angela Rayner feels she's been set up for failure because that target is not achievable. There aren't the bricks or indeed the water supply for those extra homes. What would you say to that?
Well, the target's tough because this is a rate of house building.
But is it just talk?
Is much larger than we've managed to achieve in recent years. But let me tell you what I see in the Cabinet Office, if you like, the junction box of the government. In meetings with Angela Rayner and the Housing Minister, Matt Pennycook, on this, they are providing excellent leadership for that department, really galvanising it through planning reforms, through more social housing. They're pulling every lever they possibly can. They are providing outstanding leadership for that department, and it isn't just Angela's goal. The responsibility isn't hers and hers alone, it's the government's goal. And what you see with a target like that is, yes, it's ambitious, yes, it's stretching, but it really focuses the mind of that department, the other bits of government that can contribute towards this. And what I see in my job of working with the Cabinet Ministers is Angela Rayner and the Housing Minister, Matt Pennycook, really focused on delivering this and providing good leadership to their department in doing it.
Pat McFadden, thank you very much indeed. That was the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster.